The moment I saw the note taped to the cabin's front door, my stomach dropped. It was a torn scrap of paper, yellowed at the edges, like it had been ripped from a cheap notebook. The words were scrawled in black ink, uneven and rushed. "Don't look outside." No signature, no explanation, just those 3 words staring at me like a warning carved into stone. I stood frozen on the porch, my breath puffing in the chilly Colorado air, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, heavy with the weight of my weekend plans. I'd driven 6 hours from Denver to this rental cabin in the San Juan Mountains, chasing solitude, craving a break from the grind of city life. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, just me and the wilderness. But now this. The cabin was exactly as the rental site had shown, a small, weathered A-frame tucked into a dense pine forest, its wood siding faded to a grayish brown. The nearest town, Silverton, was a 30-minute drive down a rutted dirt road that had rattled my Jeep's suspension. The listing had promised seclusion and stunning views, with photos of cozy wood paneling, a stone fireplace, and windows that framed the jagged peaks. I'd booked it last minute, drawn to the idea of disappearing for a weekend. I'd told my sister I was heading to the mountains, but hadn't given her specifics. She'd probably assume I was fine until I texted her Sunday night. That was the plan. Anyway, I peeled the note off the door, the tape sticking to my fingers like it didn't want to let go. The handwriting looked fresh, the ink dark and unweathered, not faded by sun or rain. I turned, scanning the clearing around the cabin. Nothing but trees, their branches swaying slightly in the late afternoon breeze. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, sharp and clean. My Jeep sat 20 feet away, its engine still ticking as it cooled. No other cars, no footprints, no signs of anyone. I tried to laugh it off. Probably kids from town messing with tourists, right? But the unease settled in my gut like a stone. I gripped the note tighter, crumpling it slightly, and pushed open the door. It creaked on its hinges, revealing the cabin's interior, a single open room with a loft above, a small kitchenette in one corner, and a fireplace stacked with logs. The furniture was sparse, a sagging couch, a wooden table, 2 mismatched chairs. The windows were large, almost floor-to-ceiling, letting in the fading sunlight. I dropped my duffel on the couch and locked the door behind me, sliding the deadbolt with a heavy clunk. The sound echoed in the quiet, making the space feel smaller, more enclosed. I set the note on the counter, smoothing it out. "Don't look outside." The words looked even worse in the dim light, like they were mocking me. I checked the windows, tugging at each latch to make sure they were secure. All locked. The curtains were thin, beige fabric, barely thick enough to block the view. I pulled them shut anyway, the metal rings scraping along the rods. The room felt safer with the outside hidden, but not by much. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was just a note, just a stupid prank. But my heart was thumping, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been here, maybe still was. I busied myself unpacking to keep my mind off it. Groceries went into the kitchenette, canned chili, instant coffee, a loaf of bread, some apples. My hiking gear, boots, map, water bottle, went on the table. I'd brought a couple of paperbacks, dog-eared thrillers I'd found at a used bookstore, and set them by the couch. The routine helped, grounding me in the familiar. I glanced at the note again, still sitting on the counter like an unwanted guest. I folded it in half, then in half again, and shoved it into my pocket. Out of sight, out of mind. Or so I hoped. The fireplace was my next task. The logs were dry, stacked neatly beside the hearth, and a small pile of kindling sat in a metal bucket. I crumpled some old newspaper from a pile nearby, headlines about local events from 2 years ago, and arranged the wood in a loose pyramid. The match hissed as I struck it, the flame catching quickly. The crackle of burning kindling filled the cabin, a comforting sound that pushed back the silence. I sat on the couch, watching the fire grow, its orange glow casting shadows on the walls. For a moment, the cabin felt warm, almost welcoming, but the note was still in my pocket, its words looping in my head. I made dinner, heating a can of chili on the small gas stove. The smell of spices filled the air, mixing with the wood smoke. I ate straight from the pot, too distracted to bother with a bowl. Every few bites, I glanced at the curtains, half expecting to see a shadow move behind them. The windows were too big, too exposed, even with the curtains drawn. I tried to focus on the chili, the fire, the creak of the couch under my weight, anything but the note. But it was no use. My mind kept circling back to it. Don't look outside. Why? What was out there? A bear? A prankster? Something worse. I checked my phone out of habit. No signal, just a blank screen with the time 7:42 p.m. The battery was at 85%, plenty for the weekend if I was careful. I set it on the table and leaned back, trying to relax. The fire was dying down, the logs settling into glowing embers. The cabin was cooling, the air sharp against my skin. I added another log, watching sparks flare up the chimney. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the pines. It was a normal sound, one I'd expected in a place like this, but it made my skin prickle. I kept imagining other sounds mixed in. Footsteps, whispers, something that didn't belong. By 9 p.m., I decided to call it a night. The loft was my bedroom, a narrow space reached by a wooden ladder bolted to the wall. I grabbed my backpack and climbed up, the rungs creaking under my weight. The loft held a thin mattress on a metal frame, covered with a quilt that smelled faintly of mildew. A small nightstand held a lamp, its bulb flickering when I turned it on. I set my phone and the folded note beside it, not sure why I didn't leave the note downstairs. Maybe I wanted to keep it close, like evidence. Or maybe I was just too tired to think straight. I changed into sweatpants and a hoodie, keeping my socks on against the cold. The loft gave me a partial view of the main room below, the fire's glow barely reaching the corners. The curtains were still drawn, the windows black behind them. I lay down, pulling the quilt over me, and stared at the slanted ceiling. The wind outside was louder now, rattling the windows in their frames. I tried to focus on my plans for tomorrow, a hike to a nearby ridge, a day spent in the mountains, just me and the trail. But the note's words kept creeping in, sharp and insistent, "Don't look outside." I closed my eyes, willing myself to sleep. The cabin creaked, settling in the cold. The fire popped downstairs, a log shifting in the hearth. Normal sounds, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. But my heart wouldn't slow down, and my mind wouldn't stop. Who had left the note? Why? Was someone out there watching the cabin, waiting for me to do something stupid? I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on my breathing, counting each inhale and exhale. It was just a prank, just a stupid piece of paper. I'd be fine. Then I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Not the wind, not the fire. A low, deliberate thump against the cabin's outer wall. My eyes snapped open, my body frozen under the quilt. The darkness in the loft was thick, the lamp's weak light barely cutting through it. I held my breath, listening. Another thump, this time closer to the window below the loft. It wasn't random, like a branch falling in the wind. It was steady, intentional, like someone testing the walls, checking for a response. I sat up slowly, my heart hammering so hard I felt it in my throat. The loft's edge was a few feet away, giving me a view of the main room. I grabbed my phone, its screen casting a pale glow. The battery was at 80% now. I crept to the edge, peering down. The fire was nearly out, just a faint red glow in the hearth. The curtains hung still, no movement, no shadows. But the air felt different, heavier, like the cabin was holding its breath with me. Another sound, a faint, uneven tapping, like fingers drumming on wood. It came from the front door. My skin crawled. I gripped the phone tighter, its light trembling in my hand. The tapping stopped, then started again, slower, more deliberate. I wanted to call out, to shout who's there, and demand answers, but my voice caught in my throat. The note's warning burned in my mind, sharp and clear. Don't look outside. I stayed crouched in the loft, counting seconds in my head. 1 minute. 2. The tapping stopped. Silence pressed in, so thick it felt like a weight on my chest. I waited, straining to hear anything. A footstep, a whisper, anything to tell me what was out there. Nothing. Just the wind again, softer now, like a sigh. I didn't move. I didn't sleep. I sat there, phone in hand, its battery ticking down to 75%, watching the darkness for any sign of movement, knowing I wouldn't look outside. Not yet. The tapping stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. It wasn't the quiet of an empty forest. It was thick, heavy, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. I crouched in the loft, my phone's dim light casting a pale glow across the quilt, my breath shallow and quick. The battery was at 75%, ticking down faster than I liked. The note sat on the nightstand, its folded edges sharp in the faint light. Those 3 words burned into my mind. Don't look outside. My heart hadn't stopped pounding since the first thump against the cabin wall, followed by that slow, deliberate tapping at the door. I gripped the phone tighter, my thumb hovering over the screen, as if it could somehow protect me. The loft felt smaller now, the slanted ceiling pressing down like a trap. Below, the main room was dark, the fire reduced to a few glowing embers that barely lit the corners. The curtains hung still, their thin fabric doing little to block the black void of the windows. I strained to hear anything beyond the wind, which had softened to a low moan through the pines. My ears ached from listening, picking up every creak of the cabin, every rustle outside. Was it just the forest settling, or something else? I couldn't tell anymore. My mind kept replaying the sounds, the thump, the tapping, like a song stuck on loop, each note sharper, more threatening. I shifted, my knees aching from crouching, and leaned against the wall. The wood was cold through my hoodie, grounding me just enough to keep the panic at bay. I told myself it was an animal, a raccoon maybe, or a deer bumping the cabin. But animals didn't tap rhythmically, didn't drag their claws, or whatever it was, across a door like that. I glanced at the note again, tempted to unfold it, to see if I'd missed something, some clue about what was out there. But I didn't move. Touching it felt like inviting whatever it warned against. Minutes crawled by. I checked my phone under 16 p.m. The battery was down to 70%. I dimmed the screen to save power, plunging the loft into near darkness. The lamp on the nightstand flickered, its bulb weak and unreliable. I hadn't heard anything new since the tapping stopped, but the silence was no comfort. It felt like a pause, like something out there was waiting for me to let my guard down. I kept my eyes on the edge of the loft, where I could see part of the main room. The couch, the table, the kitchenette, all still, all normal. But the air felt wrong, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then it came again. A low thump, softer this time, against the back wall near the kitchenette. My breath caught, my body tensing like a coiled spring. Another thump, then a third, each one measured, deliberate, moving along the wall toward the window. I clutched the phone, its edges digging into my palm. The sounds were closer now, not random like a branch in the wind, but purposeful, like someone, or something, circling the cabin, testing its edges. I wanted to move, to check the locks again, but my legs wouldn't budge. The note's warning echoed in my head, louder than ever, don't look outside. I forced myself to breathe, counting each inhale to stay calm. 1, 2, 3. The thumping stopped. I waited, ears straining. Nothing, just the wind again, and the faint crackle of the dying fire. I told myself it was over, that whatever it was had moved on. Maybe it was an animal, confused by the cabin's lights. But then I heard it, a new sound, sharper, more deliberate. A slow, dragging scratch, like nails on wood, coming from the front door again. It wasn't fast or frantic, but steady, intentional, like someone carving a message. My skin prickled, goosebumps rising under my sleeves. I slid back against the wall, pulling the quilt over my legs as if it could shield me. The scratching went on, unhurried, each drag lasting a second or two before pausing. I pictured a hand out there, pale and thin, scraping at the door with long, jagged nails. My mind was racing now, conjuring images I didn't want. Someone standing in the dark, face pressed to the wood, listening for me. I shook my head, trying to push the thoughts away. It was just the wind, I told myself, or a branch caught on the door. But the rhythm was too even, too human. The scratching stopped. Silence again, but it felt like a trick. I checked my phone 9:45 p.m., 65% battery. I turned the screen off, letting my eyes adjust to the dark. The loft was a black void now, the lamp's flicker barely reaching the ceiling. I could still see the main room below, the faint glow of embers outlining the furniture. I wanted to climb down, to check the door, to make sure the deadbolt was still locked. But the idea of moving, of making any sound, felt like a mistake. What if it heard me? What if it was waiting for that? I don't know how long I sat there, frozen, listening to the silence. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. Time felt slippery, stretched by fear. My phone was at 60% now, its light my only anchor. I kept it close, my thumb brushing the screen to keep it awake. The wind outside had died down, leaving the cabin in a hush that made every small sound louder. The creak of the loft's floorboards, the drip of a faucet in the kitchenette, my own heartbeat thumping in my ears. I tried to focus on those, to ground myself in the familiar, but my mind kept drifting back to the note. Don't look outside. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. Then, a new sound. Not a thump or a scratch, but a faint, uneven rustle, like footsteps crunching on pine needles. It came from the side of the cabin, near the window by the couch. My breath hitched. I leaned forward, just enough to peer over the loft's edge. The curtains were still drawn, but the fabric seemed thinner now, almost translucent in the dark. I couldn't see anything beyond them, just blackness, but the rustling grew louder, closer, stopping right outside the window. I imagined boots on the ground, heavy and deliberate, someone standing inches from the glass. I held my breath, waiting. The rustling stopped, silence again, but it was different this time, sharper, like the world was holding its breath with me. Then, a tap. A single, soft tap against the window, like a fingertip testing the glass. My heart lurched. Another tap, then a third, each one precise, like someone knocking politely, asking to be let in. I pressed myself against the wall, my phone shaking in my hand. The taps came faster now, a steady rhythm, not loud but insistent, like they knew I was listening. I wanted to scream, to yell, go away, and make it stop. But my voice was gone, stuck in my throat. The note's words were all I could think of, looping endlessly. Don't look outside. I wouldn't. I couldn't. But the tapping was relentless, moving from the window by the couch to the one near the kitchenette, then back to the front door. It was circling, probing, looking for a way in. Or maybe it already knew the way and was just toying with me. I checked my phone again, 11:20 p.m., 55% battery. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low hum, almost too faint to hear. It wasn't mechanical, not like a generator or a car. It was organic, like a voice, or voices, layered together, vibrating through the walls. I strained to make out words, but there were none. Just a steady, unsettling drone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. My skin crawled. I clutched the quilt tighter, pulling it over my shoulders, as if it could block out the sound. The hum grew louder, then faded, then came back, like it was moving around the cabin. I pictured a figure out there, pacing in the dark, its head tilted, listening for me. My mind flashed to stories I'd read. Hikers gone missing in these mountains, their bodies found weeks later, no explanation. I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on the loft, the wall, the phone. I was safe inside. The door was locked. The windows were latched. Nothing could get in. But the hum didn't stop, and neither did the feeling that I wasn't alone. I don't know when I started counting again, but I was doing it now, whispering numbers under my breath to keep the panic down. 1, 2, 3. The hum faded, replaced by silence again. I checked my phone, 12:03 a.m., 50% battery. The loft was freezing now, the air biting through my hoodie. I wanted to climb down, to stoke the fire, but the idea of moving felt like a trap. What if it heard me? What if it was waiting for me to make a sound? Another sound broke the silence. A sharp, metallic clink, like something hitting the door's handle. My heart stopped. I leaned forward, peering into the main room. The deadbolt was still in place, a faint glint in the ember's glow. But the clink came again, louder, like someone was testing the lock, trying to turn it. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. The clinking stopped, followed by a long, slow scrape, like a blade dragging across the door. My mind screamed, someone's out there. Someone's trying to get in. I slid down, lying flat on the mattress, the quilt pulled over my head like a kid hiding from a monster. The scrape went on, slow and deliberate, then stopped. Silence again, but it was worse than the noise. I waited, my breath hot against the quilt, my phone pressed to my chest. No more sounds came. No thumps, no taps, no scrapes. Just the wind, faint and steady, and the occasional pop from the fire's embers. I checked my phone, 1:15 a.m., 45% battery. I hadn't heard anything in nearly an hour, but I didn't trust it. The silence felt like a lie. I stayed there, curled up in the loft, until my eyes burned from staring into the dark. The lamp had gone out, its bulb finally giving up. My phone was my only light now, its screen dim but steady. I kept it on, draining the battery because the darkness was worse. I thought about the note, still on the nightstand, its words a chain around my thoughts. Don't look outside. I hadn't. I wouldn't. But the sounds, the thumps, the taps, the scrapes, hadn't stopped because I followed the rules. They'd stopped because whatever was out there wanted them to. I don't know when I started shaking, but I was now, my body trembling under the quilt. The cold was part of it, but not all. It was the fear, the kind that sinks into your bones and stays there. I kept seeing that note in my mind, the jagged handwriting, the ink too fresh, too real. Who had left it? Why? Was it for me, or for anyone who came to this cabin? I didn't know, and that was the worst part. Not knowing what was out there, not knowing if it was still there, waiting. The night dragged on. My phone hit 40% battery, then 35%. The wind picked up again, rattling the windows, but no other sounds came. No thumps, no taps, no scrapes. Just the cabin, creaking in the cold, and me, alone in the loft, waiting for dawn. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just lay there, listening. The notes warning louder than any sound from outside. Don't look outside. And I didn't. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was looking in. The first gray light of dawn crept through the edges of the curtains, and I felt my chest loosen. Just a fraction. I was still curled up in the loft, the quilt tangled around my legs, my phone clutched like a lifeline. Its battery was down to 32%, the screen's dim glow my only company through the long, sleepless night. The cabin was silent now, no thumps, no taps, no scrapes. Just the faint whistle of wind through the pines outside. The note still sat on the nightstand, its folded shape a constant reminder, don't look outside. I hadn't, but the sounds from last night, the deliberate thumps, the slow scratching, the eerie hum, lingered in my mind, sharp as the cold biting through my hoodie. The fire was almost out, just a faint glow in the hearth. The cabin was freezing, the air biting through my clothes. I checked my phone, 9:45 p.m., 18% battery. The whispering stopped, but the footsteps didn't. They were louder now, crunching closer to the windows. I heard a faint tap, like a finger on glass, then another, moving from one window to the next. My heart was in my throat. I wanted to scream to make it stop, but the second note's words held me back. You were earned. I hadn't looked outside, hadn't broken the rule, but it didn't matter. They were here anyway. The tapping grew faster, more insistent, like a demand. I clutched the knife, my knuckles white, and aimed the flashlight at the loft's edge. The main room was dark, the curtains black shapes against the windows. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it. The presence outside, heavy and real. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low scrape, like something dragging along the cabin's wall. It was slower than last night, more deliberate, like they were carving something into the wood. I stayed in the loft, my back against the wall, the quilt over my legs. The flashlight was dimming, its batteries weak. My phone was at 15% now, useless except as a light. The scraping continued, moving around the cabin, pausing at each window before starting again. I counted the seconds between each sound, trying to predict their path, but it was erratic, unpredictable. My mind kept flashing to the campsite, the red X, the scratched-out face. Whoever was out there knew this place, knew its history. And now they knew me. The night stretched on, the sounds coming and going, whispers, footsteps, taps, scrapes. I didn't sleep, didn't move. My phone hit 10% battery, then 8%. The flashlight flickered, barely cutting through the dark. The fire was dead, the cabin cold and silent, except for the noises outside. I kept the knife in my hand, the second note's words echoing. You were warned. I hadn't looked outside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was looking in, waiting for me to make a mistake. And as the hours dragged toward dawn, I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. The second night's whispers and footsteps lingered in my bones as the first light of dawn crept through the curtain edges. I was still in the loft, curled under the quilt, the kitchen knife clutched in one hand, my phone in the other, its battery now at 6%. The flashlight had died hours ago, its batteries drained, leaving me in near darkness until the sun rose. The cabin was silent, the fire long dead, the air thick with the smell of ash and my own fear. The second note, "You were warned," lay crumpled beside the first on the nightstand, its jagged handwriting a fresh wound. The sounds from last night, the chanting whispers, the circling footsteps, the relentless tapping, had stopped, but they'd left me raw, my nerves frayed to breaking. I sat up, my body aching from another sleepless night, my eyes burning from staring into the dark. The loft felt like a trap, its low ceiling pressing down, but it was the only place I felt marginally safe. My phone's screen flickered, barely holding on. I turned it off to save what little power remained, relying on the gray dawn light filtering into the cabin. The main room below looked untouchable, the table and chair still barricaded against the door, the curtains drawn tight. But the memory of that second note, slipped under the door like a threat, made the cabin feel alive, watching me as much as I was watching it. I climbed down the ladder, each creak of the rungs like a gunshot in the quiet. My legs were shaky, my hands trembling as I gripped the knife. The second note's words, "You were warned," echoed in my head, sharper than the first. I checked the door, still locked, the barricade intact. I moved the table and chair aside, my muscles protesting, and pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing, just the soft rustle of pine needles outside, stirred by a morning breeze. I wanted to believe it was over, that daylight had chased whatever it was away. But the scratches on the door, the topo map's red X, the scratched-out face in the Polaroid, they told me otherwise. I needed answers. The notes, the sounds, the campsite, they weren't random. Someone, or something, was targeting this cabin, and I was caught in it. I started searching the cabin, moving methodically despite my fear. The kitchenette yielded nothing but dusty cans and a cracked mug. The couch cushions hid only crumbs and a lost pen. I checked the fireplace, sifting through the ash, but found no clues, just the charred remains of last night's logs. The loft was my last hope. I climbed back up, the knife tucked into my waistband, and started poking around. Under the mattress, tucked against the bed frame, I found a small, leather-bound journal, its cover worn and stained. My heart lurched. I pulled it out, the pages brittle and yellowed, smelling of mildew. The handwriting inside was tight, frantic, different from the notes but no less urgent. The first entry was dated 3 years ago, from someone named J. Carter. They'd rented the cabin for a week, seeking solitude like me. But the entries quickly turned dark. Night 1 heard tapping outside, thought it was a raccoon. Night 2 whispers, like voices, circling the cabin. Night 3 found a note, "Don't look outside." My breath caught. It was the same. Exactly the same. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. Carter wrote about a local legend, something the bartender in Silverton had mentioned, the Watcher in the Woods, a figure tied to disappearances in the San Juans. Hikers, campers, even locals, gone without a trace, their bodies sometimes found weeks later, always near a strange symbol carved into a tree or rock. Carter's entries grew erratic, describing footsteps, shadows at the windows, and a growing sense of being hunted. The final entry was incomplete, scrawled in a panic, "It's here. It knows my name. I shouldn't have looked." The sentence cut off, the page torn. I closed the journal, my heart pounding. Whoever J. Carter was, They hadn't left this cabin on their own terms. The journal felt heavy in my hands, like it carried the weight of Carter's fear. I tucked it into my backpack, next to the topo map from the campsite. The red X, the scratched-out Polaroid, the notes. It was all connected. I needed to go back to that campsite to see if I'd missed something. The idea of leaving the cabin terrified me, but staying felt worse, like waiting for the next note, the next sound. I packed quickly: water, granola bars, the knife, the journal. My phone was at 5% now, useless for anything but a flashlight. I pulled on my boots, checked the door's locks one last time, and stepped outside. The morning was crisp, the air sharp with pine and frost. The Jeep sat untouched, its tires still intact, but I didn't trust it yet. Not after the notes, not after the sounds. I locked the cabin door and headed for the trail, the knife in my hand, my eyes scanning the trees. The forest was quiet, the sun filtering through the pines, but the stillness felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. I kept to the path, my boots crunching on gravel, my heart thudding with every step. The campsite wasn't far, a mile, maybe less, but every shadow, every rustle made me flinch. When I reached the clearing, it looked the same: the fire pit, the torn tarp, the shredded sleeping bag, but it felt different, heavier, like the air itself was watching. I moved to the spot where I'd found the map, my eyes darting to the trees. Nothing moved, but the prickling on my neck wouldn't stop. I knelt, sifting through the dirt, and found it almost immediately: a rusted knife. Its blade chipped but sharp, half buried under leaves. It wasn't a camping knife, too crude, too heavy, like something meant for more than cutting rope. I held it up, the metal cold against my skin, and noticed faint scratches on the handle, like the ones on the cabin door. I tucked the knife into my backpack, my hands shaking. I kept searching, moving deeper into the clearing. Under a pile of branches, I found the metal box again, the one with the Polaroid. I hesitated, my stomach twisting, but forced myself to open it. The photo was still there, the group in front of the cabin, one face scratched out. But now I noticed something I'd missed in the background. Near the trees was a shadow, tall and thin, too distinct to be a trick of the light. My breath caught. I shoved the photo into my backpack, not wanting to look at it anymore. The forest was too quiet now, the birds gone, the wind still. I stood, the rusted knife in one hand, my kitchen knife in the other, and scanned the trees. Nothing. But the feeling of being watched was stronger, like eyes boring into my back. I turned, half expecting to see someone, or something, standing there. Just trees, their branches swaying slightly. I backed away, my heart racing, and started back toward the cabin, moving faster than before. The trail felt narrower, the trees closer, their shadows longer in the late morning light. When I reached the cabin, I locked the door behind me, my hands trembling as I slid the deadbolt. I dropped my backpack on the couch, the journal, map, rusted knife, and photo spilling out. The second note, "You were warned," stared up from the counter, its words sharper now. I sat, the kitchen knife beside me, and opened the journal again. Carter's words about the watcher, the disappearances, the symbol. It all matched what I'd found. The red X, the scratched-out face, the knives. I didn't know what it meant, but it wasn't random. Something was out there, tied to this cabin, and it wasn't done with me. The sun was high now, but the cabin felt darker, the windows too big, the curtains too thin. My phone was at 3%, its screen flickering. I turned it off, saving the last of its power. The journal lay open, Carter's final words staring up. I shouldn't have looked. I hadn't looked outside, not really, but the sounds, the notes, the campsite, they were closing in. And as the afternoon faded, I knew the night was coming again, bringing whatever was out there with it. The afternoon light faded fast, the cabin's windows turning gray as the sun sank behind the San Juan peaks. I sat on the couch, the kitchen knife in my lap, the journal open beside me, its pages filled with J. Carter's frantic warnings about the watcher in the woods. The topo map, rusted knife, and Polaroid with the scratched-out face lay scattered on the table, each item a piece of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. My phone was dead, its screen black after flickering out at 3% battery. The flashlight was useless too, its batteries drained. The only light came from the fire I'd rebuilt, its flames casting jittery shadows on the walls. The second note, "You were warned," sat on the counter next to the first, their words like a noose tightening around my thoughts. The cabin was colder now, the air sharp despite the fire. I'd barricaded the door again, the table and chair wedged tight, the deadbolt locked. The windows were latched, the curtains drawn, but they felt flimsy, like paper against whatever was out there. The journal's entries looped in my head, tapping, whispers, a figure in the trees, a symbol tied to missing hikers, the red X on the map, the rusted knife, the defaced photo. It all pointed to this cabin, to me. I wanted to run, to throw everything in the Jeep and drive to Silverton, but the scratches on the door, the sounds from the last 2 nights, they told me leaving wasn't safe. Not yet. I tried to stay busy, to keep the fear at bay. I ate a granola bar, the crumbs sticking to my dry throat. I checked the locks again, my hands shaking as I tugged each latch. I added another log to the fire, the wood hissing as it caught. But every sound, the creak of the floor, the pop of the flames, made me flinch, expecting the thumps, the taps, the whispers to start again. The journal said Carter had heard their name called, that the watcher knew them. I pushed the thought away, but it clung, heavy and cold. My name. Did it know my name? By 7 p.m. the cabin was dark, the fire's glow barely reaching the corners. I climbed to the loft, the ladder creaking under my weight, the knife in one hand, the rusted knife from the campsite in my pocket. The loft felt smaller tonight, the ceiling closer, the air thicker. I sat against the wall, the quilt over my legs, the journal beside me. The firelight flickered below, casting long shadows that danced like figures on the walls. I listened, my ears straining for anything beyond the wind, which was soft tonight, barely a whisper through the pines. Then it started, a low knock, not loud but deliberate, coming from the front door. My heart lurched. I gripped the knife, its handle slick with sweat. Another knock, then a third, each one slow, measured, like someone waiting for an answer. I held my breath, my eyes locked on the loft's edge, where I could see the door below. The barricade was still in place, the deadbolt secure. But the knocks kept coming, steady and unhurried, moving from the door to the window by the couch, then to the kitchenette. It was circling, just like last night, but slower, more confident. I wanted to shout, to demand who's there, but my voice was gone, trapped in my throat. The journal's words flashed in my mind, "It knows my name." I shouldn't have looked. I hadn't looked outside, hadn't broken the rule, but it didn't matter. The knocks grew louder, joined by a new sound. A low hum, like the one from last night, but clearer, more distinct. It wasn't one voice but many, layered together, vibrating through the walls like a chant. My skin crawled. I pictured figures outside, hooded and silent, their breath fogging in the cold, their eyes fixed on the cabin. The hum grew, filling the air, making the windows rattle. I clutched the quilt, my knuckles white around the knife. The fire flickered below, its light dimming as the logs burned low. Then, a sharp click, and the cabin plunged into darkness. The lamp in the loft went out. The fire's glow snuffed like a candle. My heart stopped. I fumbled for the flashlight, forgetting it was dead, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone. Its screen stayed black, the battery gone. I was blind, the loft a void of black, the hum outside louder now, pulsing like a heartbeat.